Her true story from Washington. My daughter screamed, "You're just waiting to die," and threw my photo frame, so I moved out and rented the basement to strangers. Now I make $3,000 a month, and she's begging to visit. I remember that evening with painful clarity. It was a quiet Wednesday night, the kind where the winter darkness settles early and the lights inside the house glow too bright against the windows. We sat around the dining table, my daughter, my granddaughter, and I. I had just finished carving the roast, the smell of rosemary and garlic filling the room. I paused and lifted my eyes from the plate. My voice was steady, gentle. "Emily, may I sit with you tonight?" She paused, fork halfway to her mouth, then looked past me as if I did not exist. Without hesitation, she slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "Because you're just a shadow in this house. You're just waiting to die. Just go rot in your room, I lend you." The words hit me like a storm. I felt my breath hitch. I saw my granddaughter's eyes widen, then quickly drop. I heard the knives and forks stop. A chill descended so rapidly I could feel goosebumps on my arms. I barely had time to register the anger and sorrow swirling in Emily's eyes before she grabbed the framed photograph that sat at the center of the table, our wedding photo, our family picture, and hurled it to the floor. The glass shattered, shards scattering like broken memories. I stood frozen. The clatter against the hardwood floor echoed in my ears. I watched Emily's chest heave with anger. My granddaughter sat rigid in her chair, blinking rapidly. I felt my heart constrict, as though someone had wrapped a rope around it. I looked around the table at them, my own flesh and blood, hoping someone would speak up, defend me, call her back. But there was only silence. The room felt crowded and empty all at once. All eyes flicked to my feet, then away. My son, who had not spoken, lowered his head to avoid contact. My daughter-in-law turned her gaze to the table, her face tight with discomfort. Even my granddaughter looked away, her lip trembling as she pretended to focus on her plate. In that moment, I realized I was no longer part of this family. I was merely an afterthought. I tried to breathe, to steady my shaking hands. I could still smell the roast and hear the car on the street outside, but those familiar comforts felt foreign. The house, once a refuge built with laughter and shared chores, had become a place where I was no longer seen. No one said a word. No one came to pick up the broken glass. No one said, "Mom, I'm sorry," or "Emily, that wasn't kind." Instead, the bright kitchen lights hummed overhead, amplifying the tension and my humiliation. I swallowed hard and looked at Emily again. She curled her shoulders forward, eyes fixed on the broken frame. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and I saw anger give way to something else. Regret, fear, I could not be sure. But I knew she did not look away because she loved me. She did it because she was afraid to claim responsibility. I lowered my gaze to the shards of glass in the soggy photograph, where my face, once smiling in wedding bliss, looked warped and sad. I felt a breath inside me deepen, reach a decision before my mind did. I was no longer welcome here. This home, filled with my memories and my care, had turned me into a liability. I could keep my mouth shut, pretend it didn't hurt, accept being invisible, but acceptance would hollow me out. I could clench my jaw and storm out, fueling the chaos, but that would only feed into her narrative. Instead, I chose something else. I would withdraw with quiet dignity, take what I could repair, and reclaim my life elsewhere. I stood up slowly, careful not to draw attention. I cleared my throat softly. "I am going to get a glass of water," I said. I did not meet anyone's eyes. I did not give Emily the reaction she expected. I wanted no confrontation. I wanted clarity. I walked from the dining room, leaving dinner behind. Shards of memory at my feet, and the words still ringing in my ears, "just waiting to die." I paused at the living room doorway, my shoulders still and heart heavy but determined. The lights of the house behind me suddenly felt licensed to leave, to go someplace where I could breathe without being gaslit by one I once called daughter. That night, I started packing a box by the guest room closet. I packed slowly, methodically, my nightgown, my favorite mug, my reading glasses. I paused as I folded the quilt my mother had made for me, then tucked it gently into the box. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not knock on any doors. I simply packed, as though writing a new chapter with items and memories chosen deliberately. In the half-light of the hallway lamp, I taped the box closed and left it in the corner with its contents intact. I slipped into bed in the spare room, pulling the cover up to my chin. I lay there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds of the street outside. I thought of the person I had been, caretaker, comforter, mother. I thought of the woman I was becoming, someone who could love fiercely but also protect what remained of her spirit. I closed my eyes and repeated under my breath, I am not a shadow. I am still here. I believe in tomorrow. I stepped back into my bedroom and paused at the edge of the broken picture frame. I knelt down, gathering the shards carefully. I flipped my hand over the jagged edge where the glass had cracked and felt something shift inside me. I tucked the frame into an old towel and carried the whole bundle to the desk drawer, closing it with deliberate calm. I thought to myself, I am not a shadow. I am not an afterthought. I am still here. I opened my closet and began gathering a few items. My soft cardigan, the pink scarf my granddaughter once knitted, my favorite blue mug. Each piece felt loaded with meaning, yet I chose them without hesitation. I folded them neatly and placed them into a small suitcase I spotted tucked in the corner. In the silence, I felt the tension settle into my shoulders. The house no longer felt inviting. The quiet felt like a punishment, but I would not let it erode me. I paused halfway through packing, my hand hovering over a stack of framed family photos on the dresser. I slid each of them face down and pushed gently until they rested inside my suitcase as well. I put in a bottle of lavender lotion and my reading glasses. Nothing more. I was not cleaning out my life, only preparing for a pause, not a surrender. The clatter of plates downstairs floated up through the floorboards. I pictured my daughter-in-law wiping dishes, my granddaughter turning off the table lamp. It was all so intimate, so domestic. I realized I loved them, and that they believed I could disappear without pause or question. My sacrifice was expected, not appreciated. I closed the suitcase and zipped it up with a resolve I hadn't felt in months. I folded the duvet off the bed, the one they no longer asked me to share, and tucked it into the corner of the room. I smoothed the sheets and straightened the pillows before pulling the bed out entirely, pushing it aside to make room. A bare mattress lay on the floor now, a threshold between what once was and what could be. I picked up the wooden hanger from my closet and tapped the headboard. There was no scream, no confrontation. The only sound was a sudden tightness in my throat. I stepped outside the room, closing the door quietly behind me. I stood in the hall for a moment, collecting myself. I did not want a scene. I did not want a fight. I just wanted space, not away from them, but away from the invisible walls that had suffocated me. I walked down to the basement door, the dim circles of light flickering beneath my feet. I paused at the doorway and took a slow breath of cooler air. The basement was my secret refuge during storms. I turned on the overhead light and noticed how everything looked small but familiar. The old shelves, the stacked storage bins, the dusty carpet. I ran my hand along the banister, feeling the grain of the wood with reverence, as though I was reacquainting myself with a part of my own soul. I spent the next hour quietly transforming the space. I cleared a corner, brought down the suitcase, set my mug and lotion on a makeshift shelf. I unrolled a blanket over the cold carpet, fluffed a pillow, and plugged in a small lamp I'd brought downstairs in case of power outages. A thin aroma of lavender and hope filled the air. I folded my cardigan and hung it from the lamp's neck. I closed the basement door on the rest of the house, but I did not lock it. I was not running. I was claiming. The tension in my chest began to unravel as I organized my new corner. It felt both foreign and liberating. I arranged a few books on the floor, an old poetry collection, a gardening guide, and my grandson's term paper on planetary orbits. I placed my reading glasses beside them. It was quiet, but not empty. It was space I carved out for myself. I climbed back upstairs, brushed the hair from my face in the bathroom mirror, and took another breath. No one had asked me to go. No one had thrown me out. I had walked, gently, firmly, away from the belief that I no longer belonged. I considered carrying the suitcase back down, but something whispered, "Stay. Stay and remember who you are." That night, I ate a small bowl of soup by lamplight in my basement retreat. The flavors were rich, comforting. When I finished, I washed the bowl and placed it on a shelf beside my mug. I lit a small candle and closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth in my bones and the peace in my hands. I whispered to myself, I am not gone. I am not lost. I am still here. As I crawled under the blanket, I acknowledged the loneliness, but I also sensed a new awareness humming through me. This was not escapism, it was light reclamation. It was choosing myself. I lay there, the mattress firm beneath me, thinking of tomorrow. I would return to cooking meals, to caring for plants, to living beneath this roof, but on my terms. I would find them again, but not as a shadow. I would be seen, and tomorrow, when I emerge from this basement, I will walk into the world with the quiet strength of someone who refused to disappear. I descended into the basement the morning after I moved my few belongings down, flipping on the single overhead bulb that cast a dim yellow glow. The place was cramped, the ceiling low, the walls lined with damp stains. Old boxes and broken furniture leaned in piles against the walls. The damp concrete floor felt cold beneath my slippers. I closed the door and stood still, letting the silence press around me. This space had never felt so unwelcoming, but today it would change. I had a mission, to transform this forgotten space into something that belonged to me. I went upstairs for notebooks and pens, returning with scrap paper and a roll of masking tape. I spread photos of cozy rental spaces across the floor, sketched ideas, and made checklists by hand. I measured the basement, noting where the ceiling dipped lower and where a window near the corner let in faint light. I labeled areas: a sleeping nook, a reading corner, a kitchenette rewrite. For hours, I painfully planned out color schemes, furniture layouts, lighting placements. Every detail mattered. The first step was cleaning. I spent the day hauling out broken chairs, emptying boxes that once stored holiday decorations, overturned paint cans, abandoned tools. The air grew dusty and stale. I wore a homemade mask of gauze and changed it several times. I swept and mopped, dumping dirty water into a bucket in the laundry area. Bit by bit, the space came clean. That evening, I painted. I chose a soft cream off-white, a warm neutral. Rolling the brush across the wall transformed the ambiance immediately. It made the space look larger and brighter. I opened the small window slightly, letting cool air and the scent of cedar latch to the new paint as I worked. By the time I finished the second coat, the basement smelled fresh and hopeful. Next, I laid flooring. I bought peel and stick faux wood planks from a discount home store, using my credit saved from years of giving gifts and money to my children and grandchildren. I took my time aligning each plank, clicking them together firmly until the floor felt solid and homey under my feet. I measured curtains from fabric left over in my sewing kit. I sewed a simple panel that blocked drafts and added softness. For lighting, I ran cables up to the ceiling and installed a small chandelier-style fixture scaled for the low ceiling. I added flex lights near the reading corner. I purchased a small love seat and a daybed with storage beneath. I added a side table, a lamp, clean linens, plush pillows, and a cozy rug. I set a coffee station with a tiny kettle, mugs and cookies. All came from my savings and coupon deals I hunted for quietly over weeks. I worked long hours, evenings, after dinner, weekends. I polished every surface, vacuumed carpet lint, arranged books and decor. I even painted small abstract flowers on one wall, a motif I'd once sketched but never shown anyone. That corner now held my watercolor brushes and photo frames of my late husband and me. Once complete, I sat on the new love seat and placed my feet on the plush rug. I flipped on the overhead lights and dimming bedside lamp. I breathed deep. The space no longer felt like a basement. It felt like a living room, a place I could rest in. I could host someone here. And maybe one day I would. I brought a plant down, the lavender I had grown on the porch, and set it on the side table, its fragrance mixed with fresh paint and dust gone non-existent. I turned on quiet radio music, soft jazz I loved. Tears prickled in my eyes, but I smiled. This was my work, born of my own sweat, resourcefulness, and silent resolve. When I finished, I photographed every angle. I wrote a detailed description: cozy, bright, independent, perfect for business travelers or guests seeking quiet retreat. I uploaded it to a rental platform, anxious but proud. Then I waited. That night, I sat in my basement sanctuary, sipping tea. Light from the models danced across the cream walls. I tucked my feet under the blanket on the daybed and closed my eyes, thinking of the journey. how a place of neglect could become a refuge. I realized I had given enough to others. Now I had given to myself. I slept that night on the daybed, feeling supported by the new floor beneath me, not the old stone below. I slept not because I had to, but because I chose to, in a space that I built. It was warm in ways both simple and profound. The next afternoon, an email from a potential guest landed. "This looks perfect. Are the photos accurate?" I typed back, steady and confident. "They are. Welcome anytime." I realized then my basement apartment was real, tangible, a testament that I could build a space not just for others, but for myself. I stood in that tiny room and whispered to the walls I had painted with my own hands, "This is mine." I listed the space on Airbnb and VRBO the morning after I finished setting it up. I photographed every corner under natural light, soft green walls, the daybed dressed in neat linens, the lavender plant by the lamp, the little kitchenette corner with mugs and kettle. I titled the listing, "Cozy Basement Studio, Quiet, Bright, and Independent." I wrote carefully about the space, ideal for business travelers, readers, or anyone seeking a warm and private stay. I hit publish and held my breath. Within hours I received a message, "Is it still available?" I responded promptly, and within a day I had my first reservation. A young woman traveling for work. I was both excited and nervous. I wanted everything to be perfect. When she arrived, I greeted her with a warm smile and a simple welcome note. I showed her around, how the lights dimmed, where the kettle was, where the towels were folded. She nodded appreciatively and said, "This feels cozy already." I left her to settle in and went to my kitchen to make us some hot carrot ginger tea, a tradition from my youth. Then I prepared small bowls of oatmeal with orange zest, what I called my nourishing breakout breakfast, and left it in the fridge with a note, "Fuel for your first morning." The next morning she emerged with a sleepy smile. She said quietly, "Thank you for the tea and oatmeal. I needed that." I offered more and we chatted softly about her work trip. She commented on how calm and welcoming the space felt. Her words warmed my heart more than I expected. Later that day, I received her review. "Cozy basement, friendly host, little breakfasts were a sweet surprise. Highly recommend. 5 stars." That first payout, $300, felt significant. Not just money. It was validation. Someone appreciated my effort, my care, and was happy to pay for it. Over the next weeks, more guests arrived. A weekend visitor for a local event, a solo traveler writing a book, a nurse working nearby. I greeted each with the same care: fresh tea, clear notes, small treats. I loaded every check-in message and watchful review into my heart. By the end of the first month, the deposits totaled $3,000. $3,000 that went straight into my account, no strings attached, earned through my own hands. I paid off a few bills of my own, put aside money for repairs around the house, and treated myself to a new pair of walking shoes. That night, I sat by my basement door and whispered, "I earned this." For the first time in my long life, I had my own independent income. The sense of self-worth, of independence, of accomplishment washed over me. I wasn't just a mother, grandmother, caretaker. I was a small business owner, a host, a provider for myself. I realized I had created something of my own, a new beginning built from solitude and determination, and that morning as I counted those first $3,000, I knew this was just the beginning. I remember the first time I saw the mortgage statement for this house. My daughter and her husband were drowning in debt. Their credit was failing, they were on the verge of losing the only home their children had ever known. And I, still working part-time at the library then, had quietly saved over the years. Not much, but enough. They never asked me to step in. They cried at the table, muttered about bankruptcy, argued late into the night. I sat quietly. Then one morning, I walked to the bank, withdrew nearly everything I had saved in 2 decades, and paid off the balance on the mortgage. The house was put in my name, legally. The paperwork sat neatly in a folder in the lockbox behind the bookshelf. I said nothing, because I did not want them to feel small, because I wanted peace, because I still believed that doing right by your children meant staying silent when you needed recognition. For years I lived in the shadow of that silence. I watched as they remodeled the kitchen, put up a new mailbox, repainted the siding. They called it our home. I never corrected them. But after the basement was rented out and my first $3,000 month rolled in, something inside me shifted. I began to think differently about myself, not as a burden, not as an invisible helper, but as a woman who had just gotten started. I opened a second savings account. I tracked every booking. I kept receipts and reviewed financial blogs written by women half my age. Then I started to dream. I started looking at listings, not big houses, just small fixer-uppers on the edges of town. My tenant in the basement had complimented my decorating, called it clean and cozy. Maybe I could do that again. Maybe I could build something of my own. By spring, I had enough to place a down payment on a modest cottage across the freeway. It needed work, but I had patience. And now, finally, income. I spent weekends cleaning it up, turning over the soil in the yard, painting cabinets. I rented it out before summer even ended. Then came the second house, a tired bungalow with a cracked front porch but good bones. I bought it outright, my first all-cash purchase in my entire life. And just like that, I was no longer someone who lived in a basement. I was a landlord. I was a woman with 3 properties, with leases in my filing cabinet, with keys on a ring that jingled like confidence. I updated my will. I created a business email. I started reading about tax deductions and passive income and liability protection. I started walking taller. One afternoon, while drinking tea in the front porch of my little bungalow, I whispered to myself, "You're not waiting to die. You're building." My daughter never asked where I was on the weekends. She never noticed when I started wearing nicer shoes. She never wondered where I got the new coat or how I managed to replace the cracked phone I had carried for 6 years. She thought I was still her shadow, but I was growing beyond the walls of the house I once paid for. I was rewriting my story in cash offers and lease agreements and quiet pride. I still lived in the basement. I still said good morning to the children, helped when asked, made soup when they were sick. But I stopped letting the silence define me. The day I got my third 5-star review from a tenant, I printed it out and taped it to the inside of my wardrobe. It read, "Best host I've ever had. Kind, respectful, inspiring." No one in that upstairs kitchen had ever used the word inspiring for me. And now, for the first time in a long time, I had a word for myself. Not mother, not grandma, not guest, but landlord, entrepreneur, provider. That was the real twist. Not just the homes, not just the money. It was reclaiming who I was before they tried to erase me. I smiled, holding those property deeds, and thought, let them think I'm fading. Let them keep shouting. I am not disappearing. I'm expanding. One morning, as I was sorting through lease agreements and making tea in my cozy basement retreat, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my daughter. I hesitated before opening it, thinking of the sharp words she'd thrown the night she yelled at me to rot in my room. But I unlocked the screen. "Mom, can I come? I'm in trouble. I lost my job. I'm struggling." I felt a jolt in my chest. My teacup wobbled in my hand. She didn't usually send messages like this. She was a proud person, always careful with words. I opened it, heart uneasy. She wrote again, "My family is in deep debt. The warehouse fire wiped out our inventory. We can't pay rent. I know what you said, rot in your room, but I'm begging. I need you." I stared at the words. I thought of the night she threw my wedding photo frame down. I remembered her face, twisted with anger. I remembered being ousted from the kitchen table. I remembered the cold silence and the way she erased me from her world. A long silence stretched in the basement. The lavender plant swayed in a thin breeze. The cheap motels I'd endured when I gave everything felt distant now. The fresh scent of the paint and the crisp new linens reminded me that I had reclaimed something sacred. I could feel the shift inside me. No longer just caretaker, but someone with agency. I took a breath and typed, "I'm sorry you are going through so much. I will help you get on your feet, but this is not the basement." Seconds crawled by. My mind flickered through images of that house, the kitchen table, the shattered frame. Their silence. Should I forgive? Should I close the basement door and never unlock it again? Then I thought of the person I had become. Not a ghost, not a shadow. A woman who had built something with her own hands. Something they could no longer ignore. My finger hovered. A tear threatened, but I thought of her child's face, still surviving, the warehouse, the bills, piling, and I hit send. The message read, "You may come, but not to live under this roof again. I can help find a place, and I can help you start over financially, but I will not erase my boundaries. I am not your safety net because you figure you can fall. You will need to stand on your own again. I will help you do that, but not at my expense." Moments later, another message popped. "I understand. Thank you. I'll look for somewhere to stay, but I had nowhere else to turn. I appreciate anything you do." I closed my phone and set it beside my mug. My hands shook slightly. The silence settled down again but felt different, brighter, filled with possibility and tension. I had given her a path, but not a bargain. I spent the next hour researching short-term rentals, local financial aid programs, budgeting tools. I drafted an email with links to cheap apartments near her job prospects and noted down community food banks. I wrote tips on rebuilding credit. I hit send. She replied, "Mom, you're unbelievable. I don't deserve this." I typed back, "You deserve your life back. Don't give up." That afternoon, I sat in my basement oasis with the soft lamp glowing beside me. I reflected on what had happened. She had hit rock bottom, and now she was asking for a hand. And I wasn't offering pity. I was offering support, with dignity. I thought of all the nights I stayed up worrying about her kids, fixing their nightmares, soothing their fevers. I thought of the constant stream of bus fare, loan payments, car repairs, birthday gifts, college tuition. I had given until I had nothing left to give, until I reclaimed my life. She might have been born from me, but she had drawn a line between us, and she had paid the price. Tonight I would let her crawl out from the wreckage, but she would walk upright again, on her own ground. That evening, I poured another cup of tea and placed it next to my glowing laptop. I thought of my daughter as someone wounded yet willing to fight. I thought of the houses I owned and the basement I refurbished. I whispered to myself, "I am still here." I smiled. Days passed. I heard that she found a modest apartment. I sent her a small check to cover her first month's rent, telling her it was because I believed in her. No guilt, no lecture, just belief. She wrote back, "You saved us, Mom." I paused. I typed, "I didn't save you. I showed you you could save yourself." Months later, I watched her stand at the podium for her church benefit fundraiser. Tough, bruised, but determined. She had rebuilt her credit, secured childcare for her kids, started a small side business. I sat in the back row, tears in my eyes, feeling both pride and relief. She looked up and caught my gaze. A soft nod passed between us. In the days after, she came once to drop off my anniversary card. No one remembers my anniversary now except her. And stayed for tea in the basement. She sat on the love seat I chose, drank the oatmeal tea I made, and said, "This is beautiful, Mom. You did this." I watched her study the space, the curtains, the soft rug, the lavender on the shelf. She paused. I thought you were broken, that I had broken you, but you're building. You're alive." Her eyes glistened. She said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." I folded my hands. I said, "Sometimes falling helps you see where to stand." She left with a small gift, a potted plant for my basement, and I did not cry. Or maybe I did, but silently. I realized that tonight I had reached a new place with her, not as dependent mother and bystander daughter, but as two survivors, one stronger than before. My daughter, at her lowest, reached out, and I responded. With boundaries and belief. That night, I sat under the basement lamp and whispered, "I am still here, for them, and for me." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the week settle into my bones. I had been rejected, erased, dismissed. But now, with boundaries intact, I was restored. I had helped her, yes, but on my terms. She had found me not as someone to take for granted, but someone to respect. I realized then that the strongest support is not sacrifice, it is dignity. And that morning, in the quiet of my reclaimed home, I felt at peace. I sat at my little desk in the basement, reading my daughter's latest message. Her request felt different this time, gentler, more aware, yet tinged with desperation. I let my fingers hover over the keyboard before I typed. I'm sorry you are struggling. I can help you find a place to stay, but not in my basement. I paused. This was the moment I had been steering toward. Not anger, not hostility, but strength. I pressed send and waited. Moments later, I saw she read it. Then, I drafted a longer email, one that would lay out not just my answer, but the truth of who I had become. I began typing, "You deserve stability and I want to help. I have turned the basement into a rental space that is now fully booked through next year. That means I cannot offer you that room," I continued. "I am currently managing 3 rental properties. This independent income is the first steady financial foundation I have had in decades. I built this for me. No longer a shadow, but a responsible landlord." I wrote about my schedule, my expenses, my tenants who respect these spaces. I explained gently how the basement is a business, and that business must run according to its own rules. I emphasized respect. "If you want to rent one of these places, I will be glad to discuss terms, but only as a tenant like anyone else." I closed with a firm kindness. "I care about you and want to support you, as someone who has always cared. But I will not serve as a doormat. You can count on me for guidance, small financial help, and moral support beyond these walls." Then I paused and clicked send. Afterwards, I closed my laptop and leaned back. The basement felt still. It had taken me months to build this space, to build these walls of respect. Now I was testing that wall. Would she crash into it? Beg for forgiveness? Retreat? The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was longer this time. "Mom, thank you for your answer. I understand. I want to rent from you, on fair terms. I'm looking at one of your other properties. Will you talk options?" I exhaled slowly. This was progress. She recognized the boundaries. Not just mine, but hers too. We exchanged a few polite texts about rent, move-in dates, and expectations. I appreciated the new tone. No entitlement, no guilt trips, only directness. 2 days later, I printed a lease agreement. I made a fresh pot of tea and set it beside the papers. 1-bedroom lease for the Maple Cottage. Lock-in date, June 15. I signed first, slid the pen across the page, and left space for her. The basement walls shimmered in the late afternoon sun. I was renting to her with equality, not exception. Later that evening, she came down with the documents. She sat on my love seat, handing back the signed copy. I handed her my copy. I said simply, "Welcome." She looked up, tears pooling in her eyes. She reached for the pen stuck in the lease and touched its ink. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me earn this." I nodded, setting down a cup of tea. Something changed in her posture. She leaned in, placing her hands around the warm mug. I could see she wasn't just receiving. I had asked her to participate. This mattered profoundly. That night, I realized what I had done. Not rescind love, not close my door. I had closed the undermining. I had said, "Respect me, and I will respect you." From then on, things shifted. Our conversations were different. Sharper, more adult, more real. She asked about tenant responsibilities. I offered advice on credit repair, but she also listened and took notes. She prepared checklists. She had a place to sleep. Not because she was my daughter, but because she was capable of standing on her own again. I had done more than support her. I had offered a path, with dignity and consequences. The lease wasn't just paperwork. It was a promise, to both of us. I walked her to the door later that week. She turned and brushed a kiss on my cheek. She said, "I admire who you are now." I kissed her forehead and said, "I admire who you are becoming." I acknowledged her suffering, but I did not suffer on her behalf. I offered partnership, not pity. In doing so, I claimed my power and gave her the space to reclaim hers. That night, as I sat by the basement lamp, I thought back to all the nights I let her anger, my invisibility, slip through me. Tonight I felt strength ripple through my bones. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I am not a stepping stone. I am a foundation." And that made all the difference. My phone rang early one morning, the screen flashing my daughter's name. I paused and let it ring. She had called before, angry, pleading, but this time I stayed silent. The phone's ringtone echoed through the basement, a steady reminder that this world still existed upstairs, but I was no longer bound by it. I let it go to voicemail. Her message rang clear and raw. "Mom, we need to talk." Please just answer. I'm sorry, I want to come see the basement again. Just let me explain. I stared at the voicemail as though it were written on the wall. I thought back to the night she told me to rot in my room, to disappear. I remembered the shattered frame. I thought of the basement I had spent months building, a place of light, of reclamation, of dignity. My fingers brushed the wooden countertop beside my laptop as I considered what to do. Later that morning, I heard the front door open and close. She was here. I felt a flicker of something. Compassion, maybe? But I held tight to my resolve. I walked upstairs, smoothing my cardigan. I opened the basement door to let her in. She stood at the top step, eyes red-rimmed, voice low. "Mom, I need to talk." I offered a half-smile, gentle, reserved, no trace of pity. She walked down and took in the space, the warm lighting, the soft rug, the fresh-cut flowers on the small table. She let out a breath, almost like she was seeing me for the first time. "I came to explain," she whispered. She looked around, breathing in the quiet comfort of the room. "This place, it's more amazing than I ever imagined." I nodded. "Showed you the transformation. The basement is booked until next year." She blinked, surprised. "Booked?" I leaned back against the wall and crossed my arms. "Booked solid. I'm running a business. Doing the manual, managing tenants, paying taxes." Her jaw tightened. You look like you were hiding. I thought it was some sentimental retreat. I didn't know you had invested in all this." "I needed it to be mine," I said, voice steady. "I needed to know that I was more than someone waiting for the end." She looked down at the lease I had framed on the table. This is the contract for a year's rental at double what it used to be." I nodded again. "I run a business now. I have 3 properties under management. I pay my own way." She swallowed, tears forming. "I didn't realize." I took a breath. "Family doesn't give permission. Family gives respect." She looked up, voice wavering. "I'm sorry. I didn't respect you. I thought you'd always be there, waiting." I nodded slowly. "You taught me that waiting to die is foolish, so I started living." Her eyes brimmed. She reached for the contract. "Mom, I want to rent here. If you'll have me." I closed the distance between us and placed the contract in her hands. We both took a deep breath. A week later, she officially became my tenant. She adjusted to the responsibilities, paying rent, maintaining the space, respecting house rules. I offered guidance, but no handouts. She showed up with a check, on time, the respect visible in her posture. A month after that, though, she filed suit against me. She claimed I had abandoned family and that she had a right to live here rent-free. I sighed deeply at the served papers. She had felt entitled until I set boundaries. Now she had changed her mind too late, and I didn't feel inclined to back down. In court, I presented the lease, the Airbnb listing, my tax returns, notarized property deeds, glowing rental reviews. She glared at me from the witness stand. But I held my ground. I answered the judge calmly. Yes, the basement was a business. Yes, I had every right as the legal homeowner and manager. No, this was not theft. This was empowerment. When the judge dismissed her claims entirely, I felt a rush of relief and something more. Justice. She walked out of the courtroom with her attorney, head down. I walked out too, on my own terms, without pity or animosity, just quiet certainty. A week later, I sat behind my laptop and recorded a video from my blog channel, now gaining traction. I pressed record. If someone throws your photo in the dirt, if they treat you like an invisible shadow, rent that space to someone else. Live your own life with joy and dignity. It is not selfish. It is self-preservation. You deserve a place that honors your worth. That video went viral. Thousands watched it. Messages poured in from women and men who had been discarded by their families. Comments said the words, "I spoke" resonated. I started living. Boundaries saved my sanity. Her story reminded me I matter. In time, subscribers reached 50,000. I never sought fame. I wanted to share truth. I shared updates, new rentals, property tours, tips for managing income, budgets, taxes. I offered support. I remained compassionate where I could. But I never again inserted myself into a family dynamic that denied my worth. One evening, I sat in my basement reading a comment from a viewer. She said she'll never stop trying to control her mother. Then watch the mother build 3 homes. And now she doesn't know what to say. I sipped my tea and closed the app. I looked around the room, the soft lighting, the painted flowers, the stack of lease agreements. I whispered, well, maybe it is time to say something. A week later, my daughter left a note, a simple thank you with a sprig of lavender. On camera, I ended the story of my life this way. You taught me that waiting to die is foolish, so I started living. You should try it. And with that, I turned off the recording, leaned back, and closed the cover on the journal I kept of every step. This was my life, my legacy. It was full of warmth, purpose, and quiet pride, not defined by anyone else's voice. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength or the price we pay for being kind too long, then I invite you to stay a little longer. Here on Grandma, True Stories, we do not shout. We remember. We remember the sacrifices, the silences, and the small victories no one clapped for. We tell the truth, the kind that hurts a little but heals more, the kind that reminds you it is never too late to reclaim your place, your voice, your life. So if you believe in dignity, in boundaries, in second chances that come with receipts, subscribe to Grandma, True Stories, because revenge has no expiration date, because wisdom does not shout, but when it speaks, the whole house listens, and because some stories were never meant to be whispered, they were meant to be heard. I'll see you next Sunday. Bring your tea, bring your truth, and bring your heart.